Japan, the land of the rising sun, a country with a proud and rich history, a country that built itself up from an agonizing defeat during World War II to become one of the most industrious countries in the world. That story is coming up right after the break. Confession, I hate cleaning my own cars. That's why I love Adams Polishes. Whatever you want to clean, polish, or shine, Adams has a specific product just for that, even for matte finishes. Since 2000, Adams Polishes has been offering premium car care products dedicated to the enthusiast. Whether you're a professional detailer or a weekend warrior, their innovative and effective products will enable you to achieve amazing results on your prized possession. Adams, made with pride and passion in the USA. After World War II, the Japanese knew that to prosper, they needed to build back their industrial centers and quickly. This included their car industry. Believe it or not, before the war, Toyota was already building cars going back as far as 1936. But with most factories turned into rubble from the bombings during World War II, it was going to be difficult. Seeing how fast the Americans built ships during World War II, the Japanese asked for our help. During the American occupation of Japan from 1945 to about 1952, American advisors agreed to help the Japanese get back on their feet. And so what do? They sent advisors into Japan to teach them how to be efficient in production. And they trained all the Japanese factory personnel how to ramp up their mass production and do it efficiently using something called the continuous improvement philosophy. Now this concept came from a guy by the name of W. Edwards Deming, and it was further refined in the 1950s as the world embraced mass production. And just as the Japanese had done for hundreds of years, they took a foreign idea and made it their own, and it made it better. They still do that today. They called it Kaizen. And if you've ever been to Japan or worked with a Japanese company, you've probably heard that word, or continuous improvement. Toyota was one of the early adopters and embraced it. And by the 1980s, Toyota created the concept of the lean manufacturing, which focused on eliminating waste and improving efficiency in the production process. And part of that was something called just-in-time production, meaning that they didn't produce the parts for the assembly line until it's needed on the assembly line. And it reduced waste, it made the production more efficient, it helped reduce inventory costs and improve customer satisfaction because the parts were there when they're needed and they didn't have to pay out front, blah, 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 blah. Within 30 years, Japanese came to prominence as manufacturers of some of the best consumer and professional electronics, including cameras, VCRs, TVs, appliances. All these things that were made in Japan were superior quality. They put out many American companies out of business, RCA, for example. Then in the late 1960s and early 1970s, Japanese cars started to make their way into the United States. And I remember this, I was a little boy, I was used to seeing giant American cars on the road, and all of a sudden we're starting to see smaller cars. I'm looking out the window, what the hell is that? Now flush with cash back home in Japan, Toyota was working to compete with Honda, which launched the Acura in 1986. That was a new brand. Nissan launched its own brand, Infiniti, in 1987. Then in 1989, Toyota created Lexus, a brand that was not even made for the Japanese market. All along, Toyota grew more proficient at what they were doing. Their cars got better, they got more tech, they got more sporty, but they were just reliable vehicles. Then in 1992, I started working for a company called NGK Spark Plugs. I was first sent to Japan to get trained at the NGK's Nagoya factory. During the next few years, I got to see several car factories in Japan, including the Motomachi factory, where the first Lexus were being built. And then later on, when I came back to work in the United States, I got to see other Japanese car facilities here in the United States and American car facilities, including Ford, Dodge, and Chrysler. In 1994 and 1995, I got to see 4 or 5 different factories, and I realized that even the Japanese car factories here in the United States, using American workers, were doing better than the American car companies with American workers. You could see it in the factory. By this time, companies like Toyota had perfected the art of Kaizen. It became a part of its culture, and you could see it on the factory line. If you just walk around and look at different stations where people are doing work, these people are just like a cut above, man. Toyota employees are like the Takumis who Nissan uses to hand build their GTR engines. The word Takumi means artisan, craftsman. These guys were definitely that. If you take a look on a factory line at Toyota, it's just like everybody's working for perfection. It's weird, like samurai. This culture has made the Toyota brand globally famous for making some of the most indestructible vehicles ever produced. Toyota Land Cruisers are so durable, terrorists and third world country military forces often use them. Toyota Hilux pickups have been known to go 1,000,000 miles. Toyota Priuses as taxi cabs in New York go easily 1,000,000 miles with regular maintenance. Even the Top Gear people couldn't kill the Toyota Hilux. So Toyotas are very, very rugged cars, and I think everybody knows it. You want to buy a car that will last you 15 years, that's the car. As Toyota motored along, Lexus was stretching its legs in racing. In 1999, Lexus entered the GS400 into the Motorola Cup North American Series. They were following their parent company, Toyota, who had many, many racing victories. Since then, countless racing teams have competed and succeeded with Lexus race cars in all levels of North American racing, from 3 consecutive Rolex 24 Hours and Daytona victories to 3 Baja 1000 off-road championships. They got a class victory at Pikes Peak. All of those things were great things for Lexus. So over the years, Lexus vehicles have raced on-road and off-road with very impressive results. Emboldened by the success and progress of Lexus as a brand, one of Toyota's premier engineers, Haruhiko Tanahashi, was having drinks in an izakaya, which is basically a bar that serves snacks and liquor. He was the guy who came up with the Toyota Mark II, the Crown, and the Celica. Sitting at the same table was his boss, Tetsu Hattori. These guys are legends now. So in Japan, there's a tradition. If you get drunk, you can tell your boss off with no consequences. And on this night, Tanahashi was berating his boss for being too conservative and not taking chances and making boring cars. And the conversation developed from there. By the end of the night, when Tanahashi headed for home, he thought, well, this is never going to happen. So he just went home and went to bed. But back at the izakaya, everybody at the table was still talking about this project. What could this be like? How would this come around? Sake was passed around for a few more rounds, and at some point, Hattori said, you know, why not? We should do it. And before long, they were making a wish list on some napkins, and we want this, we should fight with these cars and all the cars. Hattori bought into it and got the ball rolling, and he walked out of there with new purpose. A few weeks later, Tanahashi was anxiously working on the basics for the presentation to present to the top executives at Toyota before they lost their nerve. By the time they were hashing out the direction, Tanahashi was promoted to a secret department at Toyota, and he was now in charge of the project P280, which was the internal code name. The original concept was a V6 convertible mid-range sports car, something like the Honda S2000, and something to replace the outgoing Mark IV Supra. But fate was going to step in again. First, they sampled the top sports cars of the time at the secret Shibetsu track in Japan. Cars like the NSX were brought out, and the 300ZX was there. The S2000 was there. All those cars were benchmarked. However, fate stepped in when the big boss told Tanahashi to make this car not like these baby sports cars, referring to Miatas and S2000. He wanted a car that would look good on a museum floor. A car that was gorgeous from every angle. The car that they wanted to rival was a Ferrari or a Lamborghini. But as they went along, they set their sights even higher. To get the driving dynamics right, he drafted none other than Hiromu Norisi, who consulted on the chassis dynamics and technical specs of the Toyota 2000 GT many years ago. He was assigned as the LFA's development test driver, and that was a big thing because the next step was going to be very, very complicated. Now, realizing that they wanted to go more upmarket, the McLaren F1 was to serve as the benchmark instead of the cars like the S2000, and now they're in a whole different league. Design started on this car in December of 2002. They considered everything. They put everything together. V8s were considered, but they decided to develop their own V10, leaning on their partner Yamaha. What they created was the 1LR GUE. It was a V10 4.8 liters with 12-to-1 compression, and it ultimately made 552 horsepower. 90% of the torque is available as early as 3,700 RPMs. No expense was spared on this engine. The engine block was made from aluminum. A lightened crankshaft spins, titanium connecting rods, which are 40% lighter than conventional rods, and aluminum pistons were also chosen. The valve cups were made from lightweight magnesium. In order to prevent valve float, they used titanium valves and low inertia valve springs. Even though it's a V10, the engine weighs only 359 pounds. That's less than most V6s and less than half of the weight of the Viper's V10 engine. This was an amazing accomplishment. All of this attention given to the rotating mass clearly worked. When finished, the LFA could rev to redline, which is 9,000 RPMs, in 0.6 of a second, making it the fastest revving production engine ever produced. This is why the tachometer is digital, because no analog gauge could spin that fast and be accurate. It was an amazing machine. When the LFA made its debut in 2009, the car's sticker price was $375,000 to $400,000. That was a very lofty MSRP for a Japanese car. That's supercar territory, but so was the performance. The road test showed this car could hit 60 miles an hour in 3.6 seconds, and it could go 202 miles per hour. It ran the Nürburgring in 7 minutes and 14 seconds, which at the time was pretty blistering. It was a fantastic run. So let's compare the competition. The Murcielago LP670-4 of that time cost about $220,000. It hit 60 miles an hour in just 2.9 seconds, which was faster than the LFA. The Ferrari 458 debuted about the same time, and it hit 60 miles an hour in 3.1 seconds, and it retailed for about $225,000. Pretty close to the Lamborghini. The Porsche 911 Turbo back then got to 60 faster for half the price. The 2009 Nissan GT-R did it in 3.3 seconds for 5 times less. This is the competition. If you're a rich guy shopping for cars, which one would you pick, right? Now, I had a chance to ride in an LFA in 2011 at Fontana Speedway. It sounded amazing, but it lacked the torque to which I was accustomed. I mean, it was not a torqueless car or anything, but it just didn't feel like the GT-R I had ridden or in the Lamborghini I had ridden in. So what do you do? This car was very rare. Only 500 LFAs were ever built. You would think that it would have sold out in days. This was new, it was exotic, it was fantastic, it was hand-built. It was built better than any of those other cars. So why was the LFA not a great success? First, because it was ahead of its time. The LFA is a complex vehicle. It's a very refined vehicle. It takes a special type of buyer to appreciate this kind of craftsmanship and what this car is about. Second, people who tend to buy 400,000 cars want to buy a car that would impress everybody. Cars like Ferraris, Porsches, Lamborghinis, McLarens. These are the super exotic cars. A Lexus being a super exotic? No, it just didn't register like that. And if you told somebody you bought a $400,000 Lexus, most people would laugh at you or think you're crazy, because most people don't know anything about cars. So what happened? These cars sat in showrooms for years. In fact, as of 2019, Lexus still had 4 unsold LFAs on dealer lots, even after selling 3 units in that same year. They just didn't fly off the shelf. But finally, after all of these years, here in 2023, the LFA is finally getting its due credit. Prices at auction are rising, with one reaching over $800,000 and another fetching $1.1 million here in August of 2023. So now people are starting to pay attention, and they really understand what this car is all about. Thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.